Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. I'm your host, Rob Kent, author of Banneker Bones and the Alligator People. Big announcement, Banneker Bones and the Alligator People will be available this coming Wednesday, May 15th. It'll be available on Amazon. It will be available on Barnes & Noble. Anywhere you go to buy books, you should be able to get a copy of Banneker Bones and the Alligator People. It will be available as an electronic book and a paperback, and then an audiobook is yet to come later this year. And I couldn't be more thrilled about the release of this book. I've been talking about it for so long. I can't wait for people to read it. Fans of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees, I think, are really going to enjoy it. It picks up right where Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees left off. For those of you that read it, you know it ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger. The first chapter is literally the exact moment after Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees ends. And don't be thinking, oh, well, if we're going to end right after the previous book, does that mean we have to wait for the Alligator People? No. You get Alligator People in chapter 3. With Banneker Bones 1, there was a lot of characters getting to know each other, establishing the setting, establishing them before the action really escalated. So it escalates a little bit slower, and then about mid-book, it just becomes an action story with the boys on jetpacks shooting robot bees with EMP blast rifles, and it's basically a Marvel film for the last half or so. But with the sequel, Banneker Bones and the Alligator People, you already know who everybody is. So we start with Alligator People attacking in chapter 3, and we just go right to the end. In some ways, I think this is a spiritual sequel to All Together Now a Zombie Story, just in that it is the tightest, most action-packed novel I've written since, with a cliffhanger every chapter, although, of course, with All Together Now, that was a little bit for an older audience. Banneker Bones were having fun, but we've got monsters, and they're chasing folks. So Banneker Bones and the Alligator People, check it out on Wednesday, May 15th, coming up right next week. If you like it, please leave a review. If your library doesn't have a copy, cost you nothing. You're going there to get all of the books anyway. Stop by the librarian's desk and just request a copy of Banneker Bones and the Alligator People. That way you get to read it for free, and hopefully other folks at the library will find it and they'll get to read it as well. Under the super secret pen name Robert Kent, I've written some adult horror novels. You know what they are. Mentioned All Together Now, All Right Now, Pizza Delivery, Always a Good Time, and the Book of David, 5-volume serial. If you want the first chapter, the Book of David, chapter 1, is available to download for free wherever fine ebooks, wherever fine ebooks are sold. And whenever you're listening to this, and so, by the way, is Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. So if you're hearing me say all this exciting stuff about Banneker Bones and the Alligator People, and you haven't read the first book, it's going to be okay. You can go and download that free ebook whenever you're listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. For more, head to middlegradeninja.com. Coming up here on the podcast, we will have Daniel Jose Older here next week, hopefully on Monday, although we're going to be talking about his new book, the sequel to Dactyl Hill Squad, the second book in that series. And because that is launching on Tuesday, hopefully we'll be able to keep our Monday date, but I just touched base with him, and he's very excited about coming and talking with us. But he's also, as you might imagine, got a very jam-packed week, so we'll be talking with Mr. Older next week. Tonight, we are talking with one of my oldest online friends, who I'm now talking with personally for the first time, author Jessica Lawson. Jessica, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, Rob. How are you?
I am wonderful. I'm excited to have you here. Why don't we... It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Why don't we start, if you would, just tell the esteemed audience a little bit about yourself, and yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, I did not go to school for writing. I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. I actually got my bachelor's degree in Spanish, and then I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that. So I went to graduate school, and I went to graduate school for outdoor recreation and natural resource management. By then, I really loved outdoor education, outdoor programming, and I thought I wanted to be a state park manager. So I went ahead and got a job that used neither of my degrees for a while. I worked in the nonprofit sector. And I ended up not even starting to write until after the birth of my first child. And I was staying home a lot. And actually, I had a daughter who napped really, really well. And so I had these hours during the day when I started watching a show that everyone had already watched. So I was watching it on reruns. It was called Gilmore Girls. And it was during that time that I started just jotting stuff down. And big surprise, it was a novel about a small town, exactly like the small town in Gilmore Girls. So that novel was obviously a big fail. That was my first novel. It was an adult one. I went on to write 7 more books, and that's when I started looking up things about querying around my second book, although I did query that first one and got a couple of bites, but once they read past the first 10 pages, yeah, it was not too good. So
is it available on a Gilmore Girls fan fiction blog at this moment?
No, it's not available anywhere. It is in a deep, deep drawer somewhere, as it should be. No, but I just started learning to write, and that was a time when I kind of educated myself online. I love that there's so much online. There's so many resources, blogs such as yours. I didn't even know how to query people. I look back on my first query letters before I started following. There's Nathan Bransford. Was that his name? Do you remember him, Rob?
Oh,
yeah.
Read his tweets every day.
Yeah.
Bransford, if you're listening, hi.
Yes. And Query Shark, and I entered Miss Blogs or Miss Snark's First Victim, the online contest. I remember being on the highway with my 2 kids on the way driving from Colorado to Iowa, pulling over so that I could enter one of the contests, because only the first 50 get in, so I could time it perfectly, because I had learned the method. You actually hit send about 3 seconds before the window opens. So I got it anyway. It was a really, really exciting time, full of rejections, and I didn't care a bit. And I wasn't the kind of person to keep on revising the same novel, because I don't even know why. I think in my heart I knew most of them weren't maybe the best idea I had in me. So I was already writing the next book by the time I started querying, and I always thought the next idea was always the best one. So I went through 8 novels that I wrote. The rest of them I had 2 young adult, and the rest were middle grade. And I queried all 8. And then with the 9th, I finally published The Actual and Truthful Adventures of Becky Thatcher. I got an agent who actually wanted to take me on as a client, which was great. And we worked on it some more, editing it some more, and the rest is history. I've been with that agent and the same publishing company, Simon & Schuster, ever since.
And do we want to say your agent's name for anyone eager to maybe reach out to her or him?
Her name is Tina Dubois, and she's with ICM.
Tina Dubois, if you're ever curious to come on a podcast, I'd be happy to chat with you as well.
She's great.
Shameless.
Don't worry about it.
So what is it you think that separated The Actual and Truthful Adventures of Becky Thatcher? And I'm being facetious because I've read it. I know it's wonderful. But what do you think it is that set that one apart from the previous, you said 8 novels?
Yes. Well, I think part of it is that I was starting to get better as a writer, and I could see that because I was starting to get rejections with feedback in them, which is gold. I always used to love that. So I knew I was kind of getting better as a writer. I always took the lessons learned in the last novel and applied them to the new one. But I honestly think it was probably because it was a hook that was marketable to the agent, possibly. I mean, obviously they look at the writing first and foremost, but it was it's a retelling of Tom Sawyer, Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer, from Becky Thatcher's point of view. And I think, sometimes it's just maybe the market feels right for the agent to feel like they could sell something. It just depends. I don't know. I got lucky.
Well, I don't know. I don't think anybody that writes 8 novels and works their butt off and then finally finds success can be said to be just lucky.
Well,
so,
luckily.
And you take me back. I remember Miss Snark's First Victim. I used to submit to those contests, got into a couple. It's very exciting. And scored a couple of literary agent interviews for the blog that way. So it was
nice.
A good time.
There you go. Yeah.
And, Janet Reed is someone that I have, I think, been told maybe, and no about 5 times because I've forever tried to get her to face the 7 questions as well.
Oh,
One
very
day.
nice.
It's on the bucket list.
Okay.
To talk with the
Janet, if
Shark.
you're listening,
Well, let's. There's so much to talk with you about your novels, about writing, but I saw something in your bio that I just can't let go. This
Oh
isn't
no.
Ellen. I don't usually ask guests to sing, but in your bio, you specify that you sing songs about lost socks. Can you sing us a song about lost
Oh,
socks?
oh, no. No. Well, in our house, we are big makeup song singers. We are big into wordplay, big into rhyming songs. I have songs about poop and pee like you wouldn't believe from when my daughters were young and learning to be potty trained. There's the songs about lost socks are kind of filled with words of frustration as well because I'm the mom who always, has to deal with the lost socks. But I don't know that it would add to the viewer's experience to hear me sing at this point. Maybe another time.
Gentle listener, you've been bailed out.
Thank
That's
you.
the good
Thank you.
news.
Thank you.
One
Shouldn't have put
day,
that in my bio.
I wanted to ask you this because you're coming up on the launch of your fifth book, and that's going to be next year. When is that fifth book coming out?
It was going to be next year. I am currently in the midst of a revision, a point of view change. So it's going to take a bit. So we are now scheduled for spring of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll come back. You'll get me an arc, and we'll go through it, and we'll talk about it. It'll be an exciting episode.
Absolutely. Fun, fun, fun.
But I wanted to ask, because you've got four wonderfully published novels with a fifth on the way. A lot of folks, spend their whole lives dreaming of just getting the one novel published, and then sometimes either because publishing is what publishing is, or because it's just hard to write another novel, they never end up following up that debut. Yet you've managed to spawn into a successful writing career. So what would you say that has maybe separated you? What have you done that's allowed you to continue to publish and continue to be successful?
Um, Gosh, I don't know. I've continued to write, first of all, and also my literary agent is a godsend. She's wonderful. She is a miracle worker. She does magic. So I would not be published without her, or at least not the amount of times she gives me advice. Just because I have 5 books out doesn't mean that I haven't during that time written and pitched books that don't get picked up. So I think there's a perseverance key in there. And maybe if an idea isn't working, we talk about it. We talk about, is this going to be something that will be marketable at this time? And I'm always encouraged to write whatever's in my heart, always, always. But there is a discussion of, if I pitch 2 or 3 ideas, I get feedback on what the thoughts are on each of those sets of pages if I pitch different things. So I'm surrounded by people who give me really good advice. And I've been very lucky and very blessed in the fact that I've gotten editors who happen to be interested in things. Waiting for Augusta was my 3rd book. It happened to be pitched to an editor whose father played a lot of golf. And it's a book about a father who played a lot of golf. So sometimes it's just those, you don't know, it's just the universe kind of helps you out for some reason, and certain times kicks you in the pants and other times, but
No, once in a while something comes along just when you need it. That's one of the things that there's a lot of things that keep me writing, but that is something that I have noticed, and it could be just that I'm so focused that I'm going to do this either way, and then it seems like because I've been so focused and working that the universe has lent me things. But it does seem like if I'm in need of a story idea or I'm stuck on a manuscript, something will come into my life that's like, oh, that is exactly what I need. Let me incorporate that in.
Yep.
And that, Jessica, is why reality is a simulation. All right, good talk.
Excellent.
And then here's a question I've been asking more and more authors. This is something that I've been wondering myself. Who is your ideal reader when you're writing?
Oh, goodness. Well, my ideal reader is anyone who picks up my book. There's no requirement. Anyone who picks it up, oh, that is ideal. When I'm writing, honestly, I am trying to put my shoes in that character's shoes, or put my feet in that character's shoes. If I put my shoes in their shoes, that would just be awkward.
But good material for a future song.
Yes, yes, yes. All good stuff. I should be taking notes. No, I'm not necessarily writing the story directly for the reader. I feel like I'm writing the story for the character, because this character is kind of spoke to me. And if I get to the point, I have lots of projects. Not all of them are ones that I finish, but if I really connect with a character enough, I feel a responsibility to them to finish the story. And that's how I know I'm going to finish a story, when I really am like, oh man, this kid needs a happy ending or something like that. So I feel like I'm not thinking about it. Does that sound bad? I'm not thinking about the reader while I'm writing the story. I'm thinking about the character and the journey, and trying my best to sink myself into the character's shoes. I don't know. What's your ideal reader?
Younger version of me.
Okay. Very nice.
So I just think back, what would me have loved? Oh, probably a Batman-like character who had to fight monsters. That would really excite me.
Excellent. I guess for my books, anyone, I wouldn't necessarily say ideal reader, but like a reader who maybe is looking for something. About 3 out of my 4 books have pretty open themes of grief and grieving. And so maybe a reader who might be able to find something that helps them somewhere in my character's journey. That would make me feel good as a writer, if I could do that. Make someone feel a little less alone.
I wanted to ask you about that, because I was noticing as I was going back through, oh, yeah, there is kind of a lot of grief in your books. Why, without getting too personal, why do you think that is?
Well, you can get personal if you'd like. And a lot of people, kind of make jokes about the dead parents in middle grade literature. Got to get them out of the way so the kids can do stuff. But for the case of my first published novel, and part of me wonders if I didn't put a little bit more of my heart into this one. In this story, Becky Thatcher she moves to St. Petersburg with her family. Her father is Judge Thatcher. Her mom is in a deep depression due to the death of her brother, her beloved brother, John. And Becky wears his clothes, and she goes out adventuring, and she has his marble sack, and it helps her feel close to him. But the character was named after my brother-in-law, John. I started writing this book after he passed away, and he was 34, and he left my sister widowed with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old daughter. And so he was the closest thing I've ever had to a brother. So part of the book was written for him. And I think that almost everything I write has a piece of that in it. So
I'm assuming that fulfills something within you that helps you with the grieving process at the same time you're helping the reader?
I think it does. I think it definitely does. Yeah. And I think that a lot of writers do that. We process our own emotions. We process our own beliefs, and we're trying to, I don't know, when I guess I write for the same reasons I read. I want to go on a journey, and I like to find out what kind of person I want to be, because, I'm getting up there, but I'm still growing. What kind of person I am and what kind of person I'd like to be. So
I think what happens is you get to be 99 and a half and you go, oh, I get it. At the end. Oh, I've got a book that was one that my agent loved. We had a few editors that were very interested in, and we couldn't make it work. But it's about a girl dealing with grief. And it's one of those that past a certain point, I held it back, and it's on my shelf, not to stay, but it's there because I'm of an age where not only am I getting up there, but some people very close to me are getting up there as well. And I'm going to need that book. I don't want to do that now when I'm not grieving. I'm going to bring that back and revisit that when I need that catharsis.
Oh, we're going to turn this into a sob fest, Rob.
I know. Let me tell you about something very sad that happened to me in my childhood. Nope, we're gonna pivot away and we're gonna talk more about Becky Thatcher,
Okay.
because that was the first of your books that I read. Obviously, my first book anybody read. Um, and what struck me at the time, and it still strikes me, is just what a brilliant idea. I was so impressed because I remember seeing that that the publisher did what you would hope they would do, which is repackage it with Twain's original
Crazy.
Huckleberry
Yeah.
Finn and Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That was
oh my,
amazing.
who is this brilliant woman? That idea was just there. Anybody could have grabbed it, and nobody did. And then
Yeah.
Jess Lawson, here she comes. She's got it. So
I got lucky.
where did that come from? What was it that wanted you to play around in Mark Twain's universe?
Well, first of all, when I saw that they actually put them in a set, and then there's this box set that says like Mark Twain and Jessica Lawson, I was like, oh my gosh, I peaked. I'm done. This is it. So yeah, my dad's a fan of that one. But this came, of all things, I was dusting, which is one of those things that as a kid, like you don't think anyone really does. But I was dusting in Colorado, my little bookshelf in our little house. And I have a couple different copies of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. So I was dusting the top of it and I pulled it out and I started thinking about like why it was that there's a girl character in there, Becky Thatcher, the main girl character. And I never really connected with her. I always wanted to be Tom or preferably Huck, who had a little bit of a harsher background, but more freedom. But I just felt sorry for her. I felt like she didn't get to have any adventures. Like, I'm sure Mark Twain, I'm never going to question the writer's intent or anything like that, but I felt bad for her. I was thinking to myself, I was a lot more like Huck and Tom as a girl. And obviously the times were different and she didn't have a choice, but I found myself wanting desperately for Becky Thatcher to have some adventure and to be a little bit more tough and to not want to marry Tom and all this stuff. So I went ahead and I wrote it, and again, like no expectations here. This was the 9th book I had started. I keep your hopes high, keep your expectations low. That was my motto. I didn't expect it to really go anywhere. And I had fun with it. And the voice, for whatever reason, came easily. And to this day, I've never written a draft as fast. And that may be because I have children, but I think it's just because every book I write gets harder for me to write. But 6 weeks for a first draft. And I've never written anything that fast. So obviously it had a ton of work to do after that, but my agent and I worked on it, and then it really didn't need that much revision by the time it went to the editorial board, which is why it was, after it was accepted, it was published the following year. And I know you know this, sometimes you get a book deal and it takes 2 years for it to come out, but I was just really, really lucky. But that's where the idea came from, dusting. Which is kind of a Becky Thatcher thing to do. Yeah,
you heard it here. Authors, dust more.
Yeah, dust that bookshelf.
And what? So of course, the double-edged sword of that is, on the one hand, oh my gosh, I'm in a box set with Mark Twain, which is the most wonderful thing that could happen. But oh my God, I'm in a box set with Mark Twain. People are going to be looking, are you as good as Mark Twain? Which is not. And I think you are, but it's not a reasonable question to ask of anybody. What a lot of pressure. So how was it that because when you read that book, you know that it's not quite Mark Twain. It's obviously hey, it's not Mark Twain, but the prose and the style are so very similar that you read it up and it is of a piece. Like, oh, this is where the story continues. This makes sense. So how did you go about getting your cadence and your prose down to a Mark Twain type rhythm?
Well, and here's the thing. I had read that book a lot. I've read a lot of Mark Twain short stories, things like that. And at the time when I picked it up and had ye old epiphany, I hadn't read it in several years. It's just part of, where you've read a book so much and you know the story and you feel like you know the background, but I hadn't read it. And once I got my idea, I was afraid to read it again because I did not want to copy the voice. I tried to make it a point not to read it. So what I did was I got up on Cliff's Notes, you know, that site where kids who haven't read the book try to cheat and get down the details so they can pass their school tests.
Oh, goodness, no, I would never visit a site like that. I would only ever read the book.
No, or to help you with a summary. So what I did is I made sure I had my plot points down, and I looked at character names, and I saw things that I would want to switch, things that I wouldn't necessarily want to include, and how to kind of make my own narrative that fit into it. Because in my book, Samuel Clemens is in fact a character. The book takes place in 1860 when Samuel Clemens was in real life a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi. So in my version, it has him, you know, his boat gets kind of docked and has to stay there in the fictional town of St. Petersburg, and he stays with the Sawyers, and he's kind of observing the town's happenings. And if you look closely and if you read the book, you'll see snippets here and there of things that take place in Tom Sawyer. You know, there's a discussion about like faking your own funeral or something like that, which is a scene out of the book. And there's a kind of a twist at the end that really gives you insight into her brother John and John's place in the work of Mark Twain. So
it was such a smart thing to do, because obviously I'm a Jessica Lawson fan. I was excited to read the book, and I said, well, of course, why wouldn't you want to write another book set in the Twain universe when you can do it? When I wouldn't do it because I don't have the skill, but you do, and you should. But I'm sure that there are readers out there who have very passionate feelings about Mr. Twain that say, oh, who's this Jane come lately gonna write a new Mark Twain novel? It's so smart to have Samuel Clemens featured in there, and just to as a way within the story itself to acknowledge that yes, we all know that this isn't officially canon. You can still write your theses and whatever it is that you're doing with the original Twain work, but here's something new and exciting that you can enjoy. That's just such a stroke of genius that I thought on your part when I read it.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. Yes, there will be no other books in the Twain universe, I don't think, on my part. I think one was probably pushing it and we pulled it off. So.
And then your next book, this is something that fascinates me about you, because I imagine, I don't know, and I want to find out. I imagine you completely throw yourself into another world when you're writing, just because your books take place in such drastically different settings with drastically different characters. I mean, you start in the Twain universe. Your next book, Nooks and Crannies, is, what was it, 1806, 1807?
1906.
Not even close. Wrong century. That's terrible.
Yes. Yes.
And it's very much in the style of Roald Dahl, and it works. It was like, oh, who is this genius that she can switch so completely? Because there's a little bit of DNA in there. You know, you're reading the same author, because I think every author leaves their signature whether they want to or not. But it is dramatically different. And then, of course, Waiting for Augusta, you're in, I think, 1972.
Yep.
Yes, got one. All right.
Yep. Very good. I had to think about it, and I wrote it.
So you're, and then you're in New York for Under the Bottle Bridge. So
yeah.
And wildly different characters. So what I want to know is, how do you approach a story and a character, especially given that it's so disparate from, I assume, your life experience and your previous writing experience?
Yeah. That's a good idea. I have a lot of ideas for Nooks and Crannies. I was actually writing that, and I pitched it to someone at a conference while Becky Thatcher was still out there, and I had already kind of given up on that manuscript. So I'd already thrown myself into that. I grew up. Did you ever watch any like BBC shows? Like Are You Being Served, Faulty Towers, that kind of thing, and Monty Python type of stuff. So I love British humor, that kind of voice, and I grew up watching that kind of thing, and I don't know, I love the idea of the, like, Clue meets Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, and I did like Roald Dahl as a child. I was a huge fan. So this girl, it started kind of with a name, actually, with her, Tabitha Crumb, and I keep a list of character names. And Tabitha, I had for the longest time, and I tried to find her story. She was in like 2 or 3 different stories before I found the right story for her name that fit her. And I was like, that's who she is. And I love the idea of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And since I like, British mysteries, I'm a big Agatha Christie fan. So I still remember reading And Then There Were None and being very, very shocked by the ending and things like that. And I don't even know what made me think I could write a mystery. I haven't written one since, and there's a reason. It was really hard for me. But I have no idea where the different ideas, you're right, they're all over the place, aren't they? But I think that's also what, I think my agent kind of likes that, because it doesn't, if you're really good at one thing, you can do that one thing over and over and in different variety of ways. But I don't know that I could, I don't think I'm that good at imagining more than one story in each setting. I don't know. I've got a lot of voices in my head, Rob. How about that? And they all live in different places.
Now we come to it. So with a list of characters kind of waiting to find a home, how many folks have you got on the list at any given time?
On my, like, how many works in progress right now?
So you said that Tabitha was a name you held
character.
on to.
I've only got 2 that are floaters, and I've set them aside for now. I've got 3 different works in progress that are going on right now, but they've kind of been pushed aside as I work on the revision for book 5. But that's one of my, people sometimes say, do you ever get writer's block? And I say, absolutely. And when I do, I switch to a different project that excites me. So I just have multiple projects going on at one time. If I get stuck on one, I go to the other one.
Oh, that's smart. And you, so how many projects are you usually working on at any one point, usually? At
least 2 or 3. But if I get to a point where I get super into one and I'm like, all right, this one, eventually one of them shoves their way to the front of the line and shoves the rest backwards. My turn. So they'll get full attention. But right now, nobody's winning the race.
Well, have you noticed a particular word count or spot where that story will start to take hold?
I usually have to get past 10, 12,000. It's 20,000 words is when I know that I'm continuing the story. Probably around 20. That's when it feels like, getting over not that words and writing is about word count, but that it feels kind of like a bit of a hump to me. And that's when because I'm a writer who I'm extremely, my characters rather are extremely chatty and my descriptions are heavy. I do a lot of cutting at the end. So my drafts tend to be longer and then I'll, slash what I need to.
How long is your usual first draft?
They keep getting longer. First draft, around 50 probably are my books, which, middle grade books can range anywhere, it depends on the book from, 30 to, it depends what genre you're writing. What are the Banneker books?
The first one is 58,000, and the second one is 78,000. Which sounds long, but it goes by quick. And the original draft was 130, so there's a lot of blood on the cutting room floor.
Yep, I can relate to that. Yeah, I think Waiting for Augusta is 72, so it's pretty, which is par, by the way, 72 par golf.
Oh yeah,
golf reference. And I didn't even plan that, but yeah. So they keep getting longer, and I think the book needs what the book needs. And editors help us, decide, hey, this is kind of, pacing is off. Pacing is a big thing for me in my editing process. I'm constantly trying to, do what you do and all together now. And
that was the easiest book to keep pacing because every chapter ends with somebody being chased by a zombie.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes I wonder why I'm writing other genres. But let's just stick with zombies because there's always a threat. Other books, people talk, and then that just ends the chapter. We talked.
Yeah. So. Maybe I'll write a zombie book. Maybe you're inspiring me.
I think you would be great at it if you wanted to. I would read it.
Well, thank you.
You come
I
back
would
here and we'll talk
love.
zombies all day.
I might. Well, you would be a main resource for me if I ever did try to write a zombie novel.
Absolutely. I am always looking to get thanked in the back of books. I would be more than happy
And you would
to
be.
read through 'em. The basics are shoot them in the head. They're dead.
Hmm.
That's all you
Good
need
to
to know.
know. Good to know.
So, what is your writing schedule like? Do you keep a regular schedule at this point, or is it when the spirit moves you?
It's one of those things where you hear different strategies, and, we've all heard a real writer writes every day. A real writer makes the time to write every day. Well, you and I are parents, and we know that sometimes, you can't write every day. Sometimes you can't write for 3 days or 4 days at a time. It's just not possible. And my routine has become, especially because I work full time now. So I get up early in the morning now. So if I can, if I'm motivated, I'll get up at 4 and try to write until about 6:15 or so, until my kids get up. And that's when I do, emailing or look on my social media. Involvement has gone quite down lately, but then I get my kids up, get them ready for school, get ready for work, come home, do homework, do activities. I am not a night person, so I'm definitely, my creativity is much better in the morning. So that's why I choose to go to bed early and then get up early. So if I can't find the time to write, I'm constantly thinking about stories. I'm sure you're the same way. I think all writers are, where the stories and characters are always with us. We're always having little snippets of conversation or little epiphanies about plot. And I'll just write something down, whether it's on a Post-it or the back of a receipt, and stuff it in my pocket or in my purse. And, my husband used to throw those away, and it used to make me so mad. I thought it was garbage. I was like, that was brilliant. And, well, what did it say? I don't know.
That's why I
But
wrote it down.
it was very important.
That's grounds for divorce. You
Yeah.
threw away my story ideas.
Yeah.
Nope, we're done.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just try to prepare myself as well as I can, because I don't have a lot of time. So I try to get my ducks in a row so that when I am writing or revising or whatever, it's go time. So.
Okay, so 4 a.m. I assume there's coffee involved at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And you're on social media block. You don't check the Twitters, the Facebook. Forget it for now. Just straight
Yeah.
to it. Do you have like a
Yeah.
little ritual to get you in the right headspace, or?
I check my calendar for the day to make sure, and for the week ahead, to make sure I'm not forgetting any children's activities or anything like that are up ahead. I'll go downstairs, make my tea or my coffee, and try not to make too much noise so the kids don't wake up, and then kind of just stretch a little bit and get to work. There's a saying that I love. What is it? Every day, and this person woke up at 8 o'clock. So like every day I get up at 8 o'clock to write, and I wait for inspiration. And if inspiration hasn't shown up by 8:05, I start without it.
That's pretty good.
So I think it's something where you just have to pound it out sometimes.
I find that I have to schedule about 15 to 20 minutes beforehand to waste time on social media, and I don't know, to putter around the room, stretch, look at my computer very fiercely, like I'm coming, just not yet. Then 20 minutes in, all right, that's enough. Can't get to work.
Yep. I like that. Yeah. Sometimes I'll do that. Yeah. I have, my social media again has gone down quite a bit. Sometimes I'll check on Twitter real quick, and then, check the news really quickly to see if there's anything to be happy about in the world. And then I'll try to get to work.
I read local news. We get the local paper, and it's the most boring thing in the world. It's always somebody coming on with they've got the antiques in their home, and someone's coming to take photos,
Oh, no.
or they're somebody is excited because it's 5 generations of one family that's gathered together. It's like, oh, there is good in the world. That's the news I want to read.
I like that stuff. Yes, that's nice.
And then, what are your reading habits?
Reading, I do mostly at night. That's when I read before I go to bed. My reading habits are that I usually have a huge stack of books, and every time I go to the library, I get too many books, and there's always something overdue, and that's just the way of it. And I consider it a donation to my library. I'm doing my job by keeping them a little late, but I read at night, and on weekends when I can. If I'm taking a child to a practice, I'll take a book and do as much as I can, or I'll be working there too. I think right now I'm reading, what am I reading? I have a memoir I'm reading. It's, what is it? Heartland. It's a memoir of working hard and being broke in the richest country on earth. I think so. So I got my nonfiction in, and then let's see, a friend just recently handed me The Woman in Cabin 10, which is a thriller that came out a while ago. I'm reading, what else am I reading? Vera Hiranandani's The Night Diary, which recently won some awards. It's a very good book. I just finished The Bridge Home by your previous guest, and that was good as well. But I like to read a mix. I just read Dragons in a Bag by Zetta Elliott, and that's kind of a younger middle grade book, but I like to try to have a variety. But yeah, what are you reading lately?
Let's see, what am I reading lately? I just finished The Usual Suspects by Maurice Broaddus, and right now I am reading Dr. Hill Squad and getting ready to chat with Daniel Jose Older.
Oh, I am so excited that you are reading that, because I'm excited the next one is coming out, and I love the first one. I actually just pitched it to, I was doing a kids need mentorship thing with a classroom this year, and I pitched that one. Yeah, I love that book. So I'm glad it's a series.
It's an absolutely wonderful story, and I can't wait to talk with the man himself and pick his brain about it. Yeah. And I just saw Maurice this weekend at MoCon, and so I got to tell him how much I really love The Usual Suspects. That one's coming out in 2 weeks. Okay. Mark it on your calendar. Esteemed audience, nobody wants to miss The Usual Suspects. And if you're wondering, are there at least a couple of sly references to the film The Usual Suspects? I can't say, but there might be.
Oh, I think you just did say.
I might have given that away a little bit. What was my next question for you? Something burning. Oh, I know what I need to ask you. Jessica Lawson.
Yes.
Have you ever seen a flying saucer, and do you believe in them?
I love that question. That's a great question.
I was wondering if it was a good question because we kept getting no's, but then, esteemed audience, if you listen to the previous episode with literary agent Alana Roth Parker, by God, we got a close encounter. Are we going to get another one? Jessica Lawson.
Not personally, but I know that there are people who have seen them, who believe that they've seen a UFO, and I believe that they saw one. And here, you know what? Let's go with the quote on the back of Waiting for Augusta. It says, "Some things are true whether other people believe you or not."
Beautiful.
So there's my answer on that. I think it would be arrogant to think that maybe we're the only intelligent beings in the whole entire universe. I don't know what kind of form that intelligent life would take. I think we probably, as humans, probably in our image, think that they would look a certain way, or, you know, but I don't know. I am open. I'm a writer. I have an imagination, and I would not be surprised, I'll tell you that, if I saw one.
Oh, I think they're out there. But even if I always say, if somebody could definitively prove to me, but my grandmother saw one, my grandmother would not lie to me.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
But if someone could say to me, Rob, we've been able to prove this mathematically. There's absolutely no flying saucers, never have been. I wouldn't want them to tell me that, because I like living in a world where that's absolutely possible.
Exactly. Yep. And what is it? Area 51? Is that what it's called? The
Nevada test site.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty curious about that. Why don't you write a book about that?
I did. Area 51 is featured prominently in the Book of David. And there was a recent documentary, I can't remember the name of it, it's just come out, about Bob Lazar, who, of course, is the man responsible for outing Area 51. And it's amazing. It doesn't definitively prove anything, but they just add up all of the things he said were true back in, I believe it was the late 70s, early 80s when he came to prominence. That everyone said that can't be possible, and now all these years later, his story hasn't changed, and those things have been borne out. So there you go. There's your evidence in your smoking gun.
Well, it's like one of my favorite shows, or my daughter's and my favorite shows, Finding Bigfoot. We haven't watched it for a while. She used to be obsessed with it. We would watch every episode. We just loved the I want to say characters, but they're not characters. They're real people. But we love them. And as they always said, like, you can't prove that it's not out there. Nobody's, you just can't. And there are different cultures, and they go all over the world. And there are different cultures that have their own version of Bigfoot. And I say, why not? And I don't know if you've noticed, there's like a lot of Bigfoot action in Kidlit. Like in the last 4 or 5 years, have you noticed? There's like the littlest Bigfoot, Jennifer Weiner, and who is it? I think, does Ellen Potter? Someone else has a Bigfoot book out. And I think Lindsay Eager's latest had some reference to Bigfoot. I'm not sure, but I feel like it's all over the place.
I'm going to go ahead and plug a book that I hope to be thanked in the back of, and that's Laura Martin's upcoming Hoax for Hire. And that's got some Bigfoot, some all the cryptids, awesome. Some Loch Ness monsters, some flying saucers, all the good stuff. So look forward to that. I think that one comes out in August, and it is well worth reading.
Good. I totally believe in Nessie. There's something there, the Loch Ness monster. So.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I always like to think that maybe somewhere there's a flying saucer, and piloting it is the Loch Ness monster and Bigfoot and Elvis. And they're drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon, and they're singing "Love Me Tender."
Oh, that is a sweet image. Oh.
Let's back to Earth a little bit. Wanted to ask you about Waiting for Augusta. In fact, let's start there. Okay. If you would just give esteemed audience who might not be familiar kind of an overview of the novel.
Okay. This is Waiting for Augusta. That is, in case that is a Colorado Book Award sticker. It won the Colorado Book Award, so they gave you a sticker.
It did. Woo!
Yeah, yay. It's a book about a boy named Benjamin Putter, and he truly believes that he has a golf ball stuck in his throat. He's been to doctors. Doctors have said it's not there, but he knows it's there. He believes it's there. And his father, at the opening of the novel, has died about a month before the book starts. And his father was a barbecue and golf man through and through, obsessed with Augusta National. Now, they keep the dad's cremation urns or his ashes in the kitchen because it was his favorite place to be. So they keep it in the kitchen. And one day, Ben, who's starting to feel like he's jumping out of his skin, like he just doesn't belong in his town, starts hearing his dad's ashes talking to him. So yes, this is a book with a talking cremation urn. So long story short, he steals his father's ashes and runs away to try to scatter the ashes at the place where his father wants his ashes scattered, which is the 18th hole of Augusta National Golf Club. And this is during the Masters tournament. Just happens to be during the Masters tournament. Had to add some stakes. And he sets off with another mysterious runaway who joins him along the way. She's kind of secretive, doesn't talk much, but or she does talk, just doesn't give him many answers to questions. And together they make their way from Hilltop, Alabama to Augusta, Georgia, via bus, via train, via stolen truck, and some other ways. And you have to see whether or not he can even sneak on the course. And if he does, if he grants his father's last request. And along the way, these two butted heads during their time when his dad was alive. Ben's an artist. It's a time when his father doesn't really approve of that. He doesn't think it's tough. He thinks Ben should be like a little bit more of a man maybe, and barbecue and golf. And so it's with the talking cremation urn, it's an opportunity for these two people who didn't talk much when dad was alive to get to know each other. So it's a book about second chances and miracles and kind of growing up and letting go.
And I love that that metaphor, that idea of a lump in the throat that you've got to swallow being a golf ball.
Yeah. Well, read the book. It might not be a metaphor.
Who knows?
Yeah.
No spoilers here.
Might not
It's
just be a
definitely a golf
metaphor.
ball.
Yeah.
The book ends in surgery.
Yes, yes, yes.
What I wanted to ask you, well, I've got a couple of questions about all your books, but that one in particular, I wondered on its surface, that story doesn't appear to be doesn't appear to be needed to be set in 1972 during desegregation, and yet that gives you so much opportunity to be there. What was it about that setting that spoke to you and was appropriate for that character and that story?
I set it in 1972 well, do you want to hear how I got the idea for it?
Of course.
Okay, so I was standing in the kitchen with my husband and his brother, both huge golfers, and we, as adults do, being slightly morbid, we're talking about what we wanted done with our bodies after we pass away. Do we want to be buried or do we want to be cremated? And we all said we wanted to be cremated and maybe scattered somewhere. And since my brother-in-law lives at the golf course, practically, he's there all the time. Oh gosh, he's watching this. Not all the time, Evan. You know,
Hi, Evan.
Work, and you and Trish go places. But anyway, I told him, you probably want to be scattered at Patty Jewett, which is the name of the golf club that he always goes to. And he said, Patty Jewett? No way. I want to be scattered at Augusta. So bam, idea born of a young boy traveling to fulfill his father's final wishes. But 1972 was important for me because it's set at Augusta National, and the father really admires this golf course. A lot of people really admire the golf course. A lot of people do. It's beautiful. A lot of golfers today, most of them would say if they could win one major tournament, it would be the Masters, because not only do you get invited back every year, but you know, it's a beautiful course. And Augusta National, as a lot of people know, most people know, has a deep history of racism. And I didn't necessarily want to write a book about it without making a reference to that. And I wasn't sure how to do that if it was set in contemporary times. And you know, every place has its history, and I didn't want to take away from the idea of the dad glorifying it, but I did think it was important to mention for young readers of today who might not know that. So I said it in 1972. I think, let's see, they started admitting Black members in 1990, but 1975 was the first year they allowed a Black player to play in the Masters. But before then, I mean, it was a long policy of they only had Black caddies, only white players, only white members. So I wanted it to be somewhere in that time period, not because it was going to be a focal point of the story, but because I wanted it acknowledged. Also, Ben, because it was set in that time period, 1972, Ben has a friendship with a Black girl from his town. They don't go to the same school. At this time, there's segregation still in Alabama in the South, and they needed to do forced integration. So forced desegregation, which means that they would bus people to schools maybe that were white to force integration. And that ended up with the result of a lot of white parents setting up things called segregation academies, AKA private schools. Something that still, I think, goes on today to avoid having diversity in their school. But Ben's friend starts going to his school, and he's great friends with her. He's excited for her to be there. But then all of a sudden, there's an incident at the beginning of the book that's kind of referred to. It's already happened, and there's an incident in the cafeteria, and he doesn't help her. And he should have, and he knows that. And she stops talking to him. She stops talking kind of in general. So he's at this place where he's hurt his friend. His father's died. He doesn't feel like, you know, he loves his art. He doesn't know how to be able to do it. He just wants to run away. And that's when he starts hearing his father's voice. So as they travel and get to know each other, he he has these conversations with his father, and he comes to realize that I think the middle grade years are one of those times when young people are starting to realize that the authority figures in their life aren't always right. The people who make the rules aren't always right. They don't always have people's best intentions in mind. And it's a story about, and I think if they don't, we risk the danger if they don't start asking questions. That's how opinions get passed down. They get absorbed by younger generations. They get spoken to the younger generations over and over until the younger generation thinks, hey, that's my opinion too. And this is a story about how Ben sees some opinions that his dad has and starts to question them by the end of the book. And so that idea of questioning authority fit in with the themes of desegregation and Augusta. Again, not a huge focal point in the story, but also when I was doing research, 1972 pops up for a desegregation, a video of parents protesting a bus in Augusta, Georgia in March of 1972. Just happened to be after I decided on 1972. Bam, there is an actual video of people, parents protesting the bus coming in and kids getting off the bus. About 2 weeks before my fictional character would have been going to the master. So it just seemed, we talked about it. It was like one of those moments, well, yeah, I was supposed to set it here. And I worked that scene into the book. When they got to Augusta, I worked them seeing that protest. So
that's what I'm telling you. Reality is a simulation.
Yeah.
What did I want to ask you about? A couple of things. With coming right at something like that, what's the best way to handle such ugliness for middle grade readers? Because on the one hand, we want to be sensitive. They're younger, they're still learning. We don't want to hit them with the full ugly nature of the world until they turn at least 13, 14, and they're already depressed anyway. Then that's when you do your in-depth unit on just how terrible much of history has been. How do you write about something so awful for middle grade readers that doesn't diminish the truth of that awfulness, but that keeps it sensitive for those young audiences?
I think you don't water things down. As you know, I've started working at a school. I work at an elementary school now. I've gotten to know some kids, and these kids are already going through a lot well before they're 13, 14. They have their own realities that, would not necessarily have them blinking an eye at some very hard situations, some very difficult material. So obviously, I think there are things that as middle grade writers, we can't show certain kinds of violence or use certain kind of language, but we can hint at it. And young readers are really smart and they can handle a lot. So I don't think you water things down. You have to water down some language and violence, but they can take a lot. They're pretty savvy.
That makes sense. And unfortunately, children who are still alive children who are alive now I can see plenty of the fruits of that continued racism throughout our history continuing to be present with us in everyday life.
And that's sort of what I was talking about. Opinions, I hear it every day, and not to go into politics because I know we don't do that on this blog, but people saying words that are clearly their parents' words, things that their parents' opinions have become their opinions, and we are breeding children who don't always ask questions, or some of them. So I love when kids ask questions, and it is a time in life when you should be kind of looking around you and saying, hey, you said not to do that, but you're doing that. What's going on? And, that kind of thing. You said to treat people the way you want to be treated. Why do we treat other people like this? So Okay, we better back off.
We better move right along. Let's talk about writing middle grade mysteries, because you've got a couple of them.
Oh gosh.
What are your tips for writing a successful middle grade mystery?
Oh, did I do another one? I thought I didn't after Nooks and Crannies. Oh, I guess Under the Bottle Bridge is kind of it's a different type. It's a different type of mystery. First of all, figure out all the details before you start writing. Don't do what I did, children, and and just kind of say, wow, I wonder what happens next. What happens next? Because Nooks and Crannies, I got, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through before I realized like a huge point. I'm like, no way. Then I had to go back and change all these things. And there were two plot twists in that book that surprised me. I didn't even realize it until it smacked me in the head. And I said, oh my gosh. And then what did I have to do? I had to go back and write the entire backstory and the entire background, none of which, really got into the actual book, but I needed to know it so that I could put details in. But I would say weave clues in along the way. There's some phrase, and I don't know what exactly it is, but it's something like, don't put a gun in the first chapter if no one's going to shoot it in the 8th chapter or something. Unless somebody's going to shoot the gun, don't put it in there. So kind of weave in objects or clues or hints that will be used later. So that maybe kind of seem like they're not important, but they will be. Also have lots of plot twists if you can, have lots of elements so that you can have red herrings. Not so many that it's confusing, but kind of just enough to distract the reader so that they're kind of lulled into a sense of thinking this, and then you hit them on the head with, oh, no, that's not it. But yeah, if I had to do it again, I would plot out the story backwards. I did some more of that in Under the Bottle Bridge. It's a different sort of mystery. It's a little bit, I would maybe not quieter mystery, but it's not, you're stuck in a house with a countess who keeps knives in her purse. It's more, yeah, it's a different mystery. But yeah, I would just say weave clues in. Don't underestimate the intelligence of your reader and make it too easy. Who is a master of mystery? Oh, Varian Johnson. If you've ever read his books, sure. He is a master of weaving things in and making you think one thing and then it's another. And yeah, so if you want tip, I think you should have him on the blog and ask him that question, or on this YouTube TV. And
either one. Mr. Johnson, you're welcome.
Mr. Johnson, please come on. I love the Parker inheritance.
This is kind of funny. Sometimes people ask me, why don't you have so-and-so, or why haven't you talked to so-and-so, as though like all these people are just lined up at my door and I'm holding it closed like, no, not you, not yet. Yeah. Mr. Johnson has been invited. Hopefully he'll hear this, and from your lips to God's ears, I would love to talk with Varian Johnson.
Yes.
Has it never occurred to me to write Judy Blume? No, it's occurred.
Hey, you never know.
Oh, I do. She wrote me personally, and it was a thrill. But it was nah, I don't have time. I was like, well, fair enough.
Hey,
you're Judy Blume.
You heard
I
that
got a personal. I'm gonna drop names. I got a personal response from her and R.L. Stein, and they were both no's. But I'm like, oh my! If you're gonna get a no, that's the writer you want to get a no from.
I would print that no out and I would frame it.
Well, it's saved.
Okay, good.
So, well, enough name dropping. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is character and character development, because you write very strong female protagonists, and of course Ben as well, although Ben is accompanied by a strong female protagonist. So what is the secret to creating a strong female protagonist, aside from obviously being one in real life?
Oh, thank you very much. I don't know that there's a secret. I actually think that all females and all males, for that matter, have the ability to be strong. And I don't know what it is. I guess sometimes you're considered strong because of what you're going through, your ability to endure things and kind of persevere, things like that. I'm trying to think about each character. I think a lot of times with female characters, you get adjectives like spunky. She's spunky. And you never hear that about boy characters for some reason. It's like, oh, he's funny and adventurous. But if it's a girl, oh, she's spunky and plucky. which are wonderful, wonderful characteristics. But I think it's have someone with a sense of adventure, have someone who's as three-dimensional as possible, because you don't have to have a super active action hero, super funny character for it to be a strong female. Intelligence is always a key for me, and that doesn't mean being great at school. It just means being self-aware and kind of, oh gosh, what is a strong female? You know, I've thought about that a lot, and I don't set about writing my books trying to write strong female characters. I think I just try to picture the character, and usually it's some combination of going through difficult things while still managing to be kind. And that might sound a bit soft to some people, but like Tabitha Crumb, she has gone through so much, but she doesn't let the world hurt her. You know, ugly things happen to her, but she doesn't let the world turn her ugly. A lot of grieving happens to, you know, through Becky Thatcher. She has a mother who's absent. Her best friend and brother has died, but she manages to find hope. And I think hope is one thing that defines the middle grade novel. That's what I love about writing for middle grade. Sometimes adult books, you kind of leave the movie like I did when I ended watching The Revenant, and I just felt exhausted and like, oh my God, what's the point? Have you ever seen The Revenant?
I tapped out after Leo didn't get eaten by the bear.
I didn't even watch the whole thing. Like, people in my husband was watching it, and I dipped in for parts, and I was like, this just looks like. And then I watched the end scene, and I won't spoil it for anyone, but I like my middle grade books, and I like how no matter how difficult the circumstances are, there is hope at the end, and you can do a lot with hope. So I think strong females hang on to that hope. They don't give up. I could use a lot of adjectives, but I think it just depends on the character.
That makes sense to me. That's one of the ways. There's a couple of ways in which I know whether a story idea is appropriate for Rob Kent or Robert Kent.
Yeah.
What's the likely ending? How dark are we going to get?
Yeah. It's a good way. A good way.
If the body count's going to be high, it's probably a Robert Kent
novel. Probably not for middle grade. Yeah. Although is there such thing as middle grade horror?
Oh, yeah.
There's middle grade horror. Oh, who is it? Lindsay. Oh, shoot me out a middle grade horror title.
Bunnicula is probably the
classic. Right, Bunnicula. Yeah. Oh, I read Bunnicula. I'm trying to think of current ones. I've read scary ghost stories, the middle grade current ones. I can't think of any current middle grade horror. I can think of young adult horror. Would you ever write young adult horror? Would you consider All Together Now?
No, yeah, All Together Now.
Yeah, it's YA.
It was gonna be middle grade originally. It was actually it was gonna be a Banneker Bones story, because I thought, well, sooner or later Banneker has to face the zombies. Okay. And then I got a little bit into it. Like, well, I knew what the ending was gonna be, and it wouldn't fit within the Banneker universe. So okay, well, it's got to be some other characters, but I wanted to have a young perspective. That was going to be my end to the zombie apocalypses. We're going to see some relatively terrible things, but I'll play it nice, and we'll keep an innocent perspective throughout. And then I got a couple of chapters in, and this is a very un-middle grade thing to say, but the Ricky and Michelle come across a overturned truck, and their two zombie parents, and the car seat is just covered in blood and gore. And it's like, oh, we're not in middle grade territory anymore. So I made it like three, 4 chapters in. I was like, nope, I guess it's young adult. Yep. So I just took my 13-year-old and make him 16. There we go, young adult.
Age him up. Age him up.
What coming back to your writing habits, because it sounds like you write when you can, but when you do get up at that 4 a.m. and you're hitting it right away, do you shoot for a specific word count? What does a successful day look like for you?
Oh, it's different every time. a lot of times, like for instance, right now I'm revising, so I go by chapter to chapter. I look to revise, I would like to revise, and usually I do it by the week so that I give myself that little extra time if I have a day or two that are off for whatever reason, because I have other things to do. But like, for instance, this week I would like to get 3 chapters revised and rewritten in first person because I'm changing perspective. But when I'm writing, it depends. But this is interesting. I recently needed to get a big word count in. Not recently, I guess this was a few months ago. And Linda Williams Jackson, she wrote a great book called Midnight Without a Moon, and a sequel, Sky Full of Stars. She and I have been blogging kind of friends for a long, long time. So she and I challenged ourselves to write 20,000 words in 2 weeks. And I'm not a person who does National Novel Writing Month. I don't speed write usually, but we did daily check. At first, we had goals and we checked in every week, and we realized quickly that wasn't working. So we had daily goals. We were both very serious about it, and we hit our goal. And that was just one of those, write as much as you can every day, knowing that by the end of the week, you have to hit 10,000 so that you can hit 20. I think I hit my 20,000 with like 2 days to go. But it's a lot of it is, how writing is a solitary activity, but I really need my critique partners and my friends. It really does help checking in with each other. I think gives you a bit more accountability. But word count, before that sprint, I usually can't write more than 500 words a day. That would be a very good day for me. How about you?
That's about where I'm at. Yeah, 500 for middle grade, about 1,000 to 1,500 for an adult story.
Yeah.
Because middle grade is just more compressed and much harder.
Yeah. I've heard of people like on Twitter, I've seen authors like, I just wrote 12,000 words in a day. Like, oh my gosh, my head would explode.
It can be done. I know it can. In fact, a few episodes back, we talked with Daniel Kenny, and he gave me the advice that when you need more energy to write, go to a hotel lobby. So I tried it, and he's absolutely right. It was a brilliant idea. I never would have thought of it.
Really?
Oh yeah, because I've gone to coffee shops. I like a nice quiet coffee shop, but you drink through 2 pots and there's it's enough coffee. What he does is he'll schedule. He doesn't write every day because he has a family to take care of as well. He will go to a Starbucks for several hours, take a little break, go to another coffee shop for several hours, and then finish up when he needs that energy in a hotel lobby. Because nobody ever asks why you're there. They assume you're staying in one of the rooms, and there's always people coming in and out and around, and there's free Wi-Fi, and you just get energized. And I know where several hotels are, and I went and I sat there, and by God, he's right. There were enough people coming in and out that there was. It
wasn't a distraction. It wasn't a distraction having people come in and out. Okay.
No, because I always toss on the earbuds. And Spotify mocks me at the end of every year. They show me the songs that were most listened to, and I can always tell what book I was writing on because I pick a theme song for every book. And there's like,
I love that.
I put a little playlist, like 10 songs or so that put me in the mood of this specific book. So like for this last year, with working on Banneker 2 and 3, it's been a lot of the Dark Knight soundtrack, lots of movie soundtracks. And it's got words. I need to know the words enough to block them out because I'm not really looking to hear the music. I'm just looking for something to block out the world. But with that going on, even with the hotel lobby, you can still feel the people coming in and out. And you look very industrious, I find, if you're sitting there typing away while
I'm sure. No one's going to come and bother you.
Do not bother me. I'm very important and working on something crucial.
Yeah. Anyone gets near you, you just have a little furrow in your brow and look at the screen. So they kind of back off.
Well, I hum even when I'm in public, and I shouldn't. It's a characteristic that Banneker has because I have it. Yeah. And if I'm really focused on something, and it doesn't sound like a song, it just sounds like but I can hear the song. It's just my little wall of sound that says, "No, world, go away. I need to focus at this moment."
You just sound like you're in deep meditation, and you're doing what you need to do to concentrate. And I've found myself singing to myself before. It's embarrassing. The worst in terms of like talking to yourself in public, things like that, is when I'm at the grocery store, the very few times when I'm there without my kids, and I'll be there with my cart and say, come on, ladies. People listen to it, like, all right, girls, come on. People are staring at me. There's no one with me. And I'm like, I usually have my kids with me. I'm sorry.
I don't get so much in trouble if somebody sees me writing. It's pretty boring. You'll hear me humming. You'll see me focused. But if I'm best time to write, I find is a nice long walk. So if I go out and I'm walking and I'm thinking through what the characters are saying, occasionally I'll just say their lines for them and I'll hear them in my head. And you'll think I'm a crazy person if you see me out there talking. I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to the characters. You just can't see them.
Oh, I'll do that like in the car if, I'll have one of the kids put like the camera on just as in black, so it's recording me, and then just put the phone up beside me, and I'll like say pieces of dialogue, or like, and then when she goes in, like in the house, there has to be like a red boot there, like, and occasionally I'll be so desperate that I'll be in public and I'll be like trying to whisper to myself into my phone so that I can later go through. I've got all these like videos on my phone that are just blank screen of me like whispering stuff, like lying. Yeah, but it's a great way.
Writers are strange. I don't know where they get that impression.
No, I think it's a great tool, because it's a great way. If I don't have anything to write with, I can just, if you want to, how quickly thoughts slip away and how quickly like dialogue slips away, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's what he says, and just get it down so you don't have to worry about it. And then, when you're writing later, you just press play, type it in, press play, say, what was I thinking? Delete, go through it.
I do. This is a terrible thing to say when you host a podcast, but I do wonder sometimes, because I try to get in audiobooks if I'm in the kitchen, or if I'm dusting or whatever I'm doing around the house. If I'm doing yard work, it's audiobook time. But I do wonder sometimes if I'm robbing myself of story ideas that might come. Maybe I could have got the Becky Thatcher idea, but instead of paying attention to what the ideas that were coming about, I was listening to a podcast and blocking out the ideas. So this will be the last episode of the Middle Grade Ninja podcast. I have just confirmed that you should never listen to podcasts. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Oh, bad marketing. Bad
marketing. Terrible marketing. But it is something that I wonder about. And there are perfectly good times to be listening to things, but I almost wonder, and this is just me personally, if I'm too busy and not doing crucial things other than just taking in input, being entertained on a regular basis, rather than allowing myself to be completely present in the moment and thinking of thoughts that might occur to me if I weren't listening to people jabbering away in my headphones.
Maybe. I mean, there's also the argument that you might get a great idea from listening to something. So I don't know. You could try going a week without it and see if you get any ideas. I don't know. There's some. I don't listen to audiobooks or podcasts usually when I'm like doing stuff, like just because I have to have like an ear out in case anybody needs me. But that's one thing that I really wish that I found a way to make more time for, things like podcasts. And, I could be listening to them, when I do certain tasks, when the kids are asleep, or I don't know. I don't exercise right now. So I was going to say when I go running, but that would be a lie. I haven't gone running in like a year.
Well, it would suck up writing time.
Yeah, exactly. Seriously. Like, do I maintain my physical body so I can live longer, or do I get those pages in that may or may not go anywhere? I'm going for the pages every time.
Theoretically, once you're in literature, your work will live on forever. So
there you go. Exactly. Who needs a body? Yep.
I'm not here, but in a way I am. This novel exists.
There you go. Yep.
Well, let me ask you a couple of practical questions, because I did want to ask you a little bit about your editorial process. I'm endlessly fascinated by how other writers go about this, because I haven't got it down to a T, which is why I'm still doing 30 drafts even at this stage in my career. You said earlier that the books are getting harder, and I'm
Yeah.
finding that as well. Why is that, you think?
I think it's because our expectations maybe change the further we are on our writing journey. I mean, I didn't read it nearly as much middle grade literature as I do now when I first started writing. And it is becoming harder and harder I feel like I have to relearn how to write a story every time. I don't know why. It's very frustrating. I feel like, why am I not getting better at this? And I think we are getting better at certain elements. It's just we have different expectations that maybe we didn't have before. Like, I wasn't so focused in on, oh my gosh, this pacing stinks, because I wasn't really thinking about pacing or I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, well, in my case, I think it's because I'm actively pursuing more difficult projects and to do something further from what I did before.
Yeah, that's it. I've pushed myself a bit too far with this current one. It's taking a bit longer, but I'm gonna figure it out. I am. It's a big quest, and yeah. In terms of editing, my process is I write a first draft. I'm one of those people who I have to get my first pages down before I can keep going, or it's gonna bother me. I have to find that voice and that rhythm, and I will rewrite those first pages over and over. And sometimes, like, the first page stays the same the first time I read it because it feels right. But I write. Which way would it be better? I write. And then before I start writing again, I'll go back and do a sweep and clean it up a bit. And then I'll continue on. And then the next time I write, I go back and do a sweep of that and write on. So my writing process has become pretty slow, but I find that I end up with a much cleaner first draft that way. But I typically, when I'm done with a first draft, I'll let it rest. I'll work on something else while it's resting. So I'm not just letting it rest. I'll go work on something else, and then I'll come back and then I'll clean it up and I'll send it to my critique partners and celebrate because it's out of my hands for a while, and they'll get back to me. And I love having different critique partners. I think it's so important because each of them has a different style of feedback, and each of them is excellent at catching different things. And it's always good to, if you're wondering if 3 out of the 4 critique partners mention something, you are pretty darn sure that it's a problem, But if maybe one mentions it and says, you might want to look at this, and nobody else mentions it, and you're on, it's just great. We always tell each other, use what's helpful, discard the rest. So I'll do that, and then it goes to my agent, and then we do more revisions and more revisions, and then we goes to my editor and we do more revisions. It's fun. I think that sometimes when I do school visits, that's something I tell people. First of all, I show them my 8-page long critique or editorial letter that's taller than me. I say, you get a few red marks. Don't worry about it. Red marks are helping you show how to make your writing better. This is what I got. So they're always like, oh my gosh. So I forget what I was going to say. What was I going to say? What was I talking about?
Just about editing and how much work goes into it and continues to go.
Yes. Something I always say is, you see books on the bookshelf, and I don't think they realize that, yes, picture books as well. These books have been edited 10, 15, 20, 30 times, It's a long process. What is your process? Do you use critique partners as well?
Oh, yeah. Thoroughly. For this most recent one, they raked me over the coals multiple times, and it was ultimately a good thing. But it took longer than I would have thought to write this middle grade novel, where I could have written and did write 2 horror novels within the same time period. And part of that was just me, after having written for adults for a little bit and coming back to middle grade, having to retrain myself to write middle grade.
Yeah.
And then part of it was just, this was a harder story to break because it was more ambitious than the last time around. And I was expanding the universe and doing some things that I thought were right, but were far more challenging for me. And so I find that I wouldn't trust publishing a novel that I didn't hate before the end. And I usually reach that stage of, okay, this is draft 30. I hate you. Why aren't you done? And then we'll break through, and then it's, oh, okay, now I can love you again. And my favorite novel is the one that's done. Oh, God bless you.
Yes, yes. Isn't it comforting to know that, though? Because when you've been through it 3 or 4 times, when you're in that, this is the worst thing in the world. Why would anyone ever want to read this? This would like make them, I don't know. It would be horrible for them to read. When you're at that stage, you know you've been there, though. In the back of your mind, you can calm down and be like, okay, breathe through it, like let it set and fall back in love with the character and come back to it. So you know, like I remember the first time I was at that stage. It was with Nooks and Crannies, and I was just like, this can't be saved. This is terrible. I'm glad I kept writing, though.
And do you go back and maybe this isn't something authors should admit out loud, but I'll admit it. I go back and I read my books. Do you go back and read your earlier books?
No. I maybe read snippets here and there. I don't. Part of me, like, you know, there's usually, once something's in the world, there's always going to be maybe a little something that you might want to change. I know with there wasn't, because I heard that podcast yesterday, but I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like, you know how you see, or you've heard of movie stars who can't sit through their own movies because they'd get the wiggles.
Oh, sure.
Because they don't want to see themselves. I don't know. I haven't gone back through and read one all the way through. I might at some point. I just feel like I don't know if
it's just a trait of egomaniacs. I wouldn't encourage
it.
Oh,
no, it's good. And you know, I've done that before, just to be like, because I knew that maybe there are a couple passages where I felt like I connected with a character, and if I'm struggling with a current book, I'll be like, wait, how did I go back and do that? But most of the time I'm looking at other books and saying, wait, how did they do that? How did they do that? But yeah, I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I should. It'd be good for me. It'd be good for self-reflection, but I don't have time for that right now.
Fair enough. You're getting it done. Keep doing what you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about school visits. What tips would you have for authors that want to arrange school visits? What makes a successful school visit?
Well, I have never arranged any. I haven't done a ton of them, but it's always been a matter of people reaching out. They need people to do workshops or panels. I got contacted because I have a little flyer if I go to a conference or something that says school visits with a little description of what the school visits are about. And I highly recommend that. If you ever go anywhere, if you have a local library, print something out, see if they'll let you leave a stack of them, because you will get contacts about it. And I can't always do them, but I would just say be professional, be polite, be prompt, ask questions, make sure they are prepared for you, make sure they have the equipment you need. I don't know, and make sure you're ready to have fun with the kids. It's one of the best things is interacting with that elementary school age group. It's a fun age. They're excited to see authors. They're excited to ask questions. And when you talk about how you wrote stuff just like they wrote, and they can be authors too, and they are writers, and you know, try not to stress out too much about it, but don't relax too much either, because those kids will keep you on your toes with questions. I'd say when you do the actual visit, have a nice mix of information and entertainment. I always like to take like these little buzzers. I have 4 different buzzers. They each make a little sound, and do like a little fairy tale trivia, something that's not related to my book, so they can all come up and, you know, play a little game, try to make it interactive if possible.
Why not related to your book?
Oh, I do talk about things related to my book, but I also know that not everyone in the audience of a school visit has always read my book, and I want to make those visits very inclusive. I want to get them excited about stories in general. You know, do I want them to read my book? Yes. Do I want them to buy my book? Yes. But my job usually there is to get them excited about reading, to show them how much I love reading, and that's why I love writing. But yeah.
That's so crucial. It's not a winner take all type of mentality. The more readers are reading, the more prepared they're going to be to keep reading when you have another book for them.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Especially when you're slow like me and you can't hope to do more than 2 in a year, and that's if it's an amazing year.
2 in a year. Oh, 2 visits in a year, you mean?
No,
Or
2
2
books.
books.
2 books written.
That's an amazing year. Yes. That's very good.
But I have those friends that can write a book, or sometimes even a book and a half a month. And so some of those books read like they were written in a month, but there are others that can do it successfully, and I just don't possess those skills.
No, honestly, I've been getting slower and slower, and it's because, I feel like I have to polish before I go on, and I need to not do it. The 2-week period where Linda and I challenged ourselves to do 20,000 words, that was very good for me, and it let me know that I do have the ability to do that, and I don't have to always be so careful. But yeah, every book is a different, like my writing experience has been so different with it, and the toolbox I take into it, and the plotting versus pantsing has just been different with all of them. Do you have a typical routine, or have yours been different?
As far as each book is a little bit different in how it wants to be approached and wants to be written. But as far as how I work, it's pretty standard. I like to pick same time every day. Like I said, 20 minutes of just bull crap, not not focus. I'm a big staller. That's one thing where deadlines will come in handy for me. But I just moved the deadline up because in school it was always, if it's due Monday morning, about 8:30, 9 o'clock Sunday night, that's when I'm going to really dig in and get started. After promising myself I was going to work all weekend. So I just set deadlines for myself and move them way up, and every day is a deadline.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
And that mostly works and gets me through.
Mm-hmm. Do you set word count goals?
I do, but word count goals can be a little bit nebulous. And what I mean by that is if I didn't hit 1,000 words for a day, but I did hit, I don't know, say 300 words, but I also managed to outline the next 4 scenes, and I know what's coming next, and I figured out some things of consequence to the plot. That's not a lost day, and my mind was working the whole time. I was doing the work.
Yeah. I'll do that same thing where I'll go and make some bullet points for the next chapter or something like that, so I know where it's headed. And who was it? What was it? There's some author I read, and I want to say Roald Dahl. I know we've talked about how sometimes your favorite authors, you go back and read their books. There's some problems in them, but this one I think was something where he was talking about his journals and how he keeps and how he writes, and his secret was always end at a place where you want to exactly what you're going to say next, and you would like to say it, just don't. Come back the next day. That way you'll go into a rhythm, and you don't come back to a page where you're just like, what now? Because you know exactly what you're going to say next. You're in a flow. So his suggestion was to not hold yourself back if you're excited to keep writing, and then come back the next day and kind of reread where you were at, and ride that wave of excitement into your writing day.
That's smart. I try not to write to the end of a chapter, or if I do, I go ahead and start the next chapter, so I'm not coming in cold the next day.
Yeah, that's smart.
I saw a BBC video with Roald Dahl toward the end of his life, and he was still living on a farm. And Roald Dahl's fascinating because he was one of the inspirations for James Bond back in the day.
Oh, because he was a RAF pilot.
Well, I mean, he was also a spy.
He was also, I've read some similar things about him. It's very charming.
He wined and dined American women for his country. Yeah. This is what I read.
That's funny.
But I saw this video, and he would go to his little writing shack in the back, and he had his comfy chair, and he would sit. I don't remember how many pencils it was, but he had it was like 10 or 15. He felt he needed to have those pencils fully sharpened, and he did it. He didn't do it with a pencil sharpener. He did it with a knife, and he sat there and he whittled them down, and he made sure he had all his pencils, and he lined them up perfectly, and then he could start. Which whatever routine gets it done.
Meanwhile, our generation, we just go on the internet for our 10 to 15 minutes. We don't. I do that too. I have to check the news, make sure things are okay, and then go into it. I should try whittling pencils maybe.
I have tried after my 20 minutes. And during that 20 minutes, I'm reading the internet, but I try not to read news because then that's just going to lead me down a rabbit hole of depression.
Yeah. Yeah,
but if I always see what other authors are doing, I've got a few different websites. I always check out Literary Rambles and see what they're up to.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Yingling's and her reviews, I always check out to see what Mrs. Yingling's up to. So I try to check out Writing Plus blogs and imagine myself appearing on them if I could ever finish the novel. that motivates a little bit.
Oh, good.
We're talking a little bit about marketing, and I know that it's getting late, and you've got an early call for those who are listening and not watching us live. We're recording this at a little after 10 o'clock at night, and you've got a 4 a.m. wake-up call. But I do want to ask you about marketing, and then I'll have one more question for you. We'll call it a show. But marketing, what has been your most effective way to market books? What's worked out the best for you?
I am probably not the best person to ask about marketing. I think a lot of writers are introverted by nature, and I'm one of them. I'm not good at marketing my books. And I'll give you an example of what kind of person I am. So I used to work at a movie theater in high school, and people would come in and see the prices for a box of Raisinets or whatever, like $4.50, or whatever it was back in the day, like $3.50, that's insane, or like a tub of popcorn. They would complain about the prices because obviously a lot of people end up spending more like at the candy counter than they do on the tickets, although tickets are really expensive now. Anyway, I would always tell them, hey, listen, there is a bulk section of candy right over there across the street at that grocery store. It's a good deal. No one's going to check your purse. Like, save some money. Like, do you know how many Sour Patch Kids you could get instead of having that little tiny packet of Sour Patch Kids? So, like, I should have been that was not me being a good employee, and I probably shouldn't. I'm sorry, movie theater. I apologize, but I was doing it for the people. Those prices were really high. But marketing is awful. Yeah. But marketing my books, I don't know all I know is that it's good to be genuinely invested in other people, so that when you do need to ask for help, like I'd been following blogs and following, people on Twitter and retweeting and doing things genuinely, for years, before I got published, so that when it came time to maybe need to ask people, on Literary Rambles, like inquire, like, hey, I've got a book coming out. I can legitimately say, I've been following your blog for 5 years. I love your blog, things like that. Making relationships, I think, is huge. It's, it's one of those things, just like getting a job. It's not always what you know, it's who you know. So I think just making those relationships with bookstores, trying to keep up with them, making relationships with fellow authors, supporting fellow authors, supporting bloggers, supporting whoever you can, so that when it comes time to maybe a time when you need a little support, you've got your crew, That
makes sense.
Yeah.
So network and get with I'm always looking for the people that are smarter than me, and they're easy to find. They're all around. But I'm always looking for who's got it going. What are they doing? I'm not doing. I'm going to go talk to them and find out.
Oh, well, yeah, I would love some marketing tips, because I should probably be using them. But yeah, that is not my forte. Much like pacing in my novels. Marketing is not my forte in the business side of writing. But what are some good tips that you've gotten from other people? Maybe you can give me maybe 2 good tips.
2 good tips. Start a podcast. So there's
That's a good tip.
Start a blog. There's 2.
Yep.
Susan K. Quinn told me a couple of things, and I'm a dummy because I said her name, and now I can't remember what exactly she said. But she had a lot of great advice, specific for marketing and for coordinating coordinating with readers ahead of time to get yourself an advance crew that's eager to read the book, that's already excited, that's out and about. That was a good tip. I know that Twitter and Facebook has been pointed out to me, and I think this is true, is less about finding new readers and more about forming connections with the readers that you already have.
I like that. Yeah. There's a lot of teachers and librarians that are on Twitter as well, that it's nice to kind of get to know them as well. So, yep.
And just let me ask you this: what keeps you writing? What brings you back to the story every day?
It's the characters. You know, you fall in love with these characters, and they really start to become alive to you, and you owe them a good ending. You know, you owe those zombie characters a good ending. Well, I guess you should have. Maybe you didn't always get. Bad example.
They got the ending they wanted. They were in a zombie novel. Yes. They understood.
No, you're right. Yeah, they seemed happy with their choice.
I could hear a couple of them saying, "Rob, it's okay. Somebody has to be eaten." I had it coming.
Together now. Yes, exactly. Oh, that book was so good. And okay, this is an aside. I'm gonna bust up the question and let all you readers out there know I am not a horror fan. Scary things scare me. I don't know what the phobia is, fear of horror novels, but I respect Rob. I've known Rob for a long time. I love his blog. He's clearly a brilliant writer. You can see that just in the style and the voice of his blog. So I gave All Together Now a chance. And yes, there's gore. And yes, there's some language, but I loved it. It's a zombie novel with heart. I was going to make some eating joke, but that's brains with zombies. But and you talked about it being like so fast paced and so action packed, and it was, but I mean, there is a lot, there's so much depth to that novel. And I went to middle school and high school in Indiana. So that's a setting that I grew up in. I mean, some of the religious themes in that book, the relationships in that book, that was a heartfelt book. And I'm going to spoil stuff if I keep talking about it.
I'm already blushing too wildly.
No, I was so impressed. And I, as I told you in email, I'm going to have a hard time reading Pizza Delivery because pizza is my favorite food. And even that cover, I can't get past. I don't think I could get past the cover. But I will try at some point for you, Rob. But All Together Now, you guys, my intro to zombie novels was Pride and Prejudice and zombies because I like Pride and Prejudice. So this is a more pure zombie novel. It has so much heart in it, and you will find yourself just in awe of what this writer is doing behind these action scenes that are going on. The emotion is just, the emotional arc is, it got me. You got me with a zombie novel. Good job.
I think that's about as high a point as we're going to get on this show. I'm very flattered. Thank you so much.
Good.
Jess, where can esteemed audience find you online? Where can they track you down and find out more about you and your books?
Sure. I am not super active on Facebook, but my one social media right now is Twitter, and my handle is @J_S_Lawson. And that's where you can find me most of the time. I also have a website that is jessicalawsonbooks.com. I keep my News and events up to date for the most part, if I have any new ones, although I haven't yet switched the fact that my next book, How to Save a Queendom, will be coming out in spring of 2021. It's my first fantasy. It's got a tiny wizard about that big. It's got some bigger wizards too. It's set in a fantasy land called Meriden, a queendom rather than a kingdom. Yeah, bit of a quest story, bit of some wall themes in there.
I heard there's a chicken involved in some way.
There's a chicken involved. I have 3 chickens. They're all named after female literary characters: Hermione, Katie Woo, and Mrs. Teaberry.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful.
I love my chickens so much, I had to put one in a book. This one's name is Peck, and it's my main character is named Stub, and Peck is her best friend. She's really her only friend in the world, and she kind of accompanies her on this journey across a queendom to try to save the day.
Get me. I'm always up for free books. That's one of my main motivations. Is since I started blogging, people get me books. Get me a copy and come back, and we'll do a deep dive as soon as it's available and the esteemed audience can read along.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful! I'd love that.
Jessica, thank you so much for making the time for this. This was an absolute joy to talk with you.
Well, it was an honor to get your email asking, Rob, and it was great to have a chat with you. I know you and I have been friends for a while, so it was nice to actually get some time to talk.
It was. And esteemed audience, what's my wrap up? Oh, check out middlegreatninja.com. Make sure you come back next week, hopefully Monday, possibly a later day, depending on Mr. Older's schedule. We'll be chatting with author Daniel Jose Older. May 15th, Wednesday, Banneker Bones and the Alligator People. It's coming. It's going to be amazing. Make sure you get your copy. If you can't wait that long, go ahead and download a free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. And that's it for the announcements. Jess, I have been asking our guests to sign us off with the sign-off phrase, hi-ya, and what have you, so we sound all kinds of ninja-like. Will you sign us off?
Absolutely. Hi-ya, and what have you.
Very ninja. That was